were lifted out of poverty. This is because also of the continued increase in our growth. The upper middle income status is achievable in 2025 because we've been steadily increasing from 2023, 2024, and now $4,256 in 2023 for capita income, and then 4,363 in 2024. So there's a slight increase in income and a decrease in poverty.
That's per capita income, which
Yes,
is
Mr. President.
just a figure, Mr. President. That's probably GDP divided by population, I think. So I think ulitin ko po yung na-raise ko during the committee hearing. Is there a way to measure how the ordinary Filipino benefits from growth rate?
Working today.
There are more jobs created. 50 million people are working today.
Million jobs a year at least.
We are creating 1 million jobs a year.
5% salary and wages.
Roughly 65% are salary and wages, which is an indication of a growing middle class. As I mentioned, also the upper middle income status that we are about to achieve by next year.
So that's why yesterday si Senator Joel naman went into definitions. So we really have to be defining when are you poor, what's the definition of poverty, and then when are you employed. Yun yung mga
Mr.
balik tayo
President,
ng balik sa ganun because those are the figures being used. So
for the poverty
yes,
poverty threshold,
yes, how is
perhaps?
that defined?
Okay, so in
Ma'am, can I cut you? Di ba nagka-controversya tayo nung committee hearing because yung food poor,
21 pesos per day.
60 plus pesos, 61 pesos per day, pag ginagastos mo daw yan sa sarili mo, you're not food poor. And then may 90 pesos per day, pag yan naman, you're not poor. Kaya nga tayo, sabi natin, if those are the definitions, definitely yung figures mo ang tataas, acceptable. Kaya nga, that's why let's be careful. What are you telling us now? The updated, definition?
No, Mr. President, I understand. Napakahirap lunukin na parang gumagasta lang tayo ng 60 pesos per day or 20 pesos per meal per person.
Yes,
Diba? So, 30 pesos na ngayon. Kasi naging 90 pesos na itong figure natin.
The World Bank.
This came from the World Bank. Now, usually it's income data. This is how the metrics are gauged. Income data from Family and Income Expenditure Survey, price data collected by the Philippine Statistics Authority, and the food bundle designed by the Nutrition Research Institute. Now, as a mother, I guess if you compute the 30 pesos a day, no, kakapiranggot na kanin, kumuha ka ng malunggay sa puno, magkano yon? Konting isda. Talagang kung pipilitin mo, aabot ka doon. Pero ito ba ay talagang realistic, di ba? So, I asked also the economic managers if, let's say, we increase the parameters, okay, we make the metrics a little bit more reasonable. Apparently, according to them, poverty incidence will still decrease. Yeah, so, and this is already factoring in inflation. Kasi kung gagamitin natin pareho lang standards from before, pareho lang yung measurement basis, pababa pa rin, pati kasama yung ano. Ngayon, Mr. President, hindi nangangahulugan na we're out of the woods or this is actually highly commendable. But we can say that we are working towards a better situation for our countrymen. That's why we also did not skimp on supporting basic institutions that will directly impact o yung talagang mararamdaman at makakatulong sa kanila.
So let's just use the figure given to us according to our chairwoman. in 2023, the poverty incidence rate was 15.1%. So how was poverty defined when we reached 15.1%?
Poverty threshold, how was it reached or
How
how
was
was
it
it
defined?
defined? Well,
How was it
if
defined?
minimum income required for a family to meet basic needs, so meaning if they cannot meet their basic needs, as I mentioned, the 90 pesos per day, I assume 90 pesos per day per
Yeah,
person,
can we find out how it was defined?
or 33,000 pesos per year for per person,
Right,
a family of 5,
165.
5,000 a year.
165,000 a year.
5,000 below,
Ganyan.
5, you are poor.
Sige, that's
So if I
yeah,
could repeat it for the record.
let's make it of record.
Okay.
And that
Hun-
is the answer for the supposed to be for the 2023 figure. That's how okay. Not now, not yung current, but how that 15.1% was reached in 2020. Sige, let's Madam
Again,
Chair.
it's 165,000 per year per a family of 5. 33,000 pesos per capita.
Pero per
Kasi yun nga yung sinasabi ng World Bank, 'di ba? Well, not 4,600 4,363 is yan yung GDP per capita income. So kung 30,000, yan, di ba? Oh, that's the computation. You're poor if you're below that. And what if it's 4,364? One one peso above then. Yeah, you're not.
So that was how I'm just soliciting facts how okay. So how about sige how about employment? What's our latest employment figure? Kasi yun po ang
Our employment act 3.6% employment. Unemployment.
Okay, sige, sa
3.7%, 3.6% unemployment.
3.6 to 3.7%.
Oh, actually bumaba na yan from 4.4%.
And then
percent.
can we revisit the definition? How was it? Anong year pala ito? What's the period if the 3.6?
2023, 4.6%.
Okay.
So far in 2024, 3.7%.
Okay. So ang claim natin nag-improve. So how was it defined? How is employment defined?
For better appreciation.
PSA yan, PSA.
The average employment hours is 40 hours per week. Yun yung average. So meaning to say there are those that are above the average that are employed longer, and the minimum is 1 hour per
Kaya nga.
week.
So if a person, sinisurvey kasi ito eh. Tama, sinisurvey. If the person, you're not giving me the exact question kasi eh. If the person claims to have worked 1 hour at the time he was surveyed, he's employed.
Yes, Mr. President, but it 0.08 lang ng mga na-survey. 0.07 ang 1 hour.
Yes,
0.07. That's why we're still able to reach a high of 40 hours per week on average
0.07.
employment. Kahit na, kasi 0.07 lang yung 1 hour.
Why did we use that definition in the first place?
International standards. Mr.
International.
President.
So yung kanina poverty, World Bank ang ginagamit natin. Ito naman sa employment, maybe ILO?
Yes.
ILO? Oh. So is it against best practice or is it against our policy for us to Philippinize the question, Mr. President?
Mr. President, the best practices are the international standards. Now, and the reason why we also do this is for, let's say, loans being extended, the viability of investments in our country. We need to be able to compare based on a standard that is acceptable for all. Now, yung palagi nating sinasabi bilang mga tagapaglingkod, ano ba talagang nararamdaman? Alam ko, doon kayo pumupunta.
Oh.
At yun din ang sinabi ng ating Senate President, paano mararamdaman ang kaginawahan? Kaya nga po, while we are debating the macro perspective, we also have to bear in mind that the government has to do certain social support projects that will compensate, even if, let's say, you're not necessarily on the bottom of the wealth structure, the poverty structure, you are still given support by the government. For example, the free state universities and colleges that the government is providing. Ito naman, hindi naman kailangan napakahirap ka to be able to
Correct.
to avail of this. And whatever you would have spent or your family would have spent for that education goes back to your family's what do you call this, ability to spend for other things. That's why, Mr. President, yun hindi na mga nasusukat yon eksakto dito sa macro, pero meron pa rin tayong mga binibigay na tulong dito.
Meron kasi akong tinutulungan, Mr. President, na pamilya, mag-asawa. Dati, totally walang trabaho. Ngayon, yung babae, manikurista, yung lalaki, umi-extra sa tricycle. So, in effect, hindi sila papasok sa unemployed, kung tutuusin. Pero, ano pa rin kulang na, humihingi pa rin ng tulong pahingi ng panggata sa bata, pagkain. So, we might be misled, ayoko sabihin deceived, but misled by our unemployment figure that, as if, maganda na ang, may kita na lahat, but the source of income and as well as the amount of the income is not sufficient for their family of 5. Actually, they are also a family of 5, Mr. President. So anong plano natin? I mean,
No,
what is the...
Mr. President,
Can-
hindi lang naman ikaw.
Yes.
Marami talagang mga lumalapit sa atin na akala natin ay magiging okay na, lalo na pagdating sa kalusugan nila. Meron na tayo universal healthcare, may mga discounts for senior citizens, may mga discounts na iba't iba for medical support, pero lumalapit pa rin sa atin kasi kulang, di ba? So, kaya nga, habang kaya natin ay nagbibigay pa rin tayo ng pero syempre, hindi naman natin sinasabing
Yung
maayos na talaga
Yung in-example ko nga, so dati sa unemployed sila, ngayon hindi na sila sa unemployed, but sa underemployed kaya sila babagsak. So do we have...
Yes.
So what is that figure for the underemployed? Mr.
Ito po, let me get that. 11% are underemployed. And the reason also for this, Mr. President, di ba nadagdagan yung trabaho? Nadagdagan yung trabaho sa mga, lalong-lalo na sa private sector. Pero hindi pa nila naaabot yung, sabihin na nating level na masasabi nating komportable sila. Katulad niyan, halimbawa ngayon, magpapasko, marami talagang nagdadagdag ng mga seasonal work para sa ating mga
So they will be
kababayan.
employed,
They will be employed.
but they are underemployed.
Compared to
So-
what a regular employee would get, it's not.
What's our observation on the trend about underemployment? Is it up? Going up?
It's
It's
still
also going down.
Yes, Mr. President.
So, okay.
The picture. Today you have 50 million working. Okay, let's start with our labor force is 51.8 million.
Our labor force is 51.8 million. 50 million are working.
Salary workers.
64% are salary workers.
Okay, 3.6 down.
Which is 32 million.
Okay. 32 million.
Private sector, 24.4.
Private sector, 24.4. 4.8 million workers in the public sector. So, actually, unemployment
1.8.
1.9
That's why.
million people unemployed. Pero Mr. Underemployment
5.9.
is 5.9. Mr. President, kung titignan mo yung chart, no, from 2018, 2018 yung number of unemployed 2.3 million, 2019 2.3, 4.5 dahil pandemic 2020, 15.9. I'm sorry. 4.5 dahil pandemic, 3.7 pandemic, 2.7, 2.2, tapos ngayon nasa 2.0. So talagang bumababa yung unemployment, tapos underemployment from 6.7 in 2022 naging 5.9 na lang.
That's number. That's the number, no? Number yun.
Yeah.
Number. Million yun. Million, yes.
41 million employees.
In 2018, 41 million ang employed. Now it's 50 million. So
Jobs a year.
Yun, sige. Okay, yes. Please state it kasi may question ako doon.
okay.
Please state. We're creating 1 million jobs a year. I think that's the
Yes, we
claim.
are-
That's
we are
the that's
more
the
than a
claim of
million jobs
our
per year.
economic managers. Can we get a description of the jobs that we're creating? What kinds?
Well, Mr. President, as you know, infrastructure, a lot of infrastructure.
So construction work?
63% are salary and wages.
First, we want to improve on that.
Yes, there are better quality jobs, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. But it's being improved, Mr. President. I know these
Can-
are small
yes, can we see-
victories. Yeah.
What have been the improvement over the years? So at the early years, 1 million jobs. Second year, 1 million jobs. But did the quality or the nature of the jobs improve? Did
Yes.
we notice any?
Yeah, the quality is improving, as mentioned by our secretary. But again, mentioned by our secretary, much more is desired.
Okay, so do we have a conscious strategy on how to improve the jobs that we're creating?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes.
As
May we know what is our plan? Naintindihan mo gusto ko sabihin? Sabi mo
51.8.
the Trabaho para sa Bayan Act, the work will be completed by the end of this year. Congratulations, Senator Joel, for that initiative and for authoring and sponsoring it.
Trabaho. Ano yun? Ano bang magagawa nun?
Oo. Tapos, oo. Mr. President, we discussed this in plenary. Now we congratulate our colleague for pushing this and for it being signed now. It's really basically improving the skills of our workers and making sure that there's a match between industry demand and also human development and training. So
At least-
that's the gist. Kasi dati, as mentioned nga by our colleague, sa ibang bansa, halimbawa, college ka pa lang or nagvo-vocational ka pa lang, meron ng partnership sa mga industriya na ito yung kailangan namin. Correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Joel. Ito yung kailangan namin. So, damihan natin ng training para dito. Halimbawa, I mean, whatever, accountancy, welding, AI training, yun yung ito yung job openings, ito yung kailangan natin. So, kaya damihan natin ang training dun sa mga sektor na yon.
Okay, so meron tayong strategy to improve the jobs we are creating, and we already embodied this strategy into a law. Yun yan. Trabaho para sa Bayan Act.
Yes, Mr.
Diba?
President.
sponsored, authored, and defended and sponsored by Senator Joel.
With the indulgence of my two colleagues,
What is
Mr.
the pleasure
President.
of Senator?
Mr. President, we just like to interject and put into the records of this August chamber that today, a couple of hours ago, the President signed the Enterprise-Based Education and Training Act, which you yourself, Mr. President, started here in this August chamber. And it's now a law, Mr. President, that would help not just create jobs, but create decent and sustainable jobs, Mr. President. If you recall, Mr. President, before, about 4% of the result of IBET graduates are being produced here in this country. And it's because of the fact that sabog-sabog ho kasi yung apprenticeship, yung pong dual training system, etc. Now, it's in one, we institutionalized the entire enterprise-based program. We came up with a clear-cut guidelines as to what kind of tax breaks they will be enjoying, 50% of the training cost. Tapos kung kayo po ay textbook institution, mag-receive kayo ng mga equipment, etc. Customs duties, exempted po yan. And at the same time, ang isa sa pinakamahalagang component nito yung one-stop shop, Mr. President. One-stop shop that would be able to attend and look into the programs to make sure that our learners will not be abused, Mr. President. So I just want to put that on record when we're talking about quality jobs that we are producing. So other than the Trabaho para sa Bayan Act, the Tulong Trabaho Act, the Enterprise-Based Education and Training Act was just signed into a law this morning. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Duly noted, Senator.
Congratulations to our colleague. So
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
this would look like parang framework laws, no? Akala natin na hindi exciting, yung pala ito pinapalabas natin yung kahalagahan ng mga batas po na ito. Madam Chairperson, using international definition, what would be the definition of a person who is in working age?
Uh, 15 and up, Mr. President.
There must be a limit to the up. I think 15 to something. There must be a ceiling.
Oh, the ceiling, ano ba yung retirement age? 65 is the retirement age in government,
Yeah.
Mr. Pero alam naman natin, may mga iba dito na lumalagpas.
Hindi, kasi international tayo kanina, so I'm asking ano yung international
Well,
definition.
yeah, in
When is
most
a person of
sectors,
working age?
15 and above.
There's no limit sa above? Okay. Using that definition, what would be the theoretical labor force of the Philippines, Mr. President?
Well, again, one of the strengths of our country is our young population. As we know, the average age of about 23 years old of our population. Now, with regards to the actual breakdown in the labor force, is that your question, sir?
How many Filipinos are of working age using the international definition?
We'll check the population data, Mr. President.
79
79 million.
million. Okay, 79 million. And then we only use 51.8 million as the figure for our labor force.
Kasi,
Do we
Mr.
know,
President,
do we have an idea how come around ilan to?
yeah.
28? We're not counting around 28 million.
Yeah, Mr. President,
part
I
of
think
labor.
first of all, I think that others are lucky enough that their 15-year-old focuses on school, on their studies. So, like for example, many of us here, our kids really go and get a job or a full-time job when they're either interning in college or they're already a graduating age of 21. Now, also, a lot of us, many also are blessed that when we feel a little tired already, marami na dyan mga over 65 have already decided not to work. So I think a number of 40 plus million is actually 28 million did not look for a job. So,
yes, yes. 28 million did not look for a job. So, is it possible that they cannot look for a job or they do not look for a job because of health reasons?
yeah, some of them health
Yeah,
reasons, some of them quality of life.
Did we dig deeper into the reason why they are not looking for a job?
Uh, I'm surprised they did. The survey data did ask them why they're not working.
Actually, gusto ko lang malaman if we have a lot of people, countrymen of working age, but who are debilitated with illness or disease, and therefore unable to be productively employed, Mr. President.
Mr. President, the bulk of them who aren't working are either in school or doing household chores. So, yun yung data na nakuha. But if you want a particular
Yes, okay.
who are sick, diba? O who are incapacitated to work because of their health situation, we can also provide that.
Can we get a figure for that? Yun lang pong the sick of working age not presenting themselves for employment because they are sick.
It's a very specific number, Mr. President. So if we can continue
okay,
on, we
sige
will
po,
provide
sige
that
po.
number in a
Thank
few
you for
minutes.
that, Mr. President. So, and then, can we now go back? Can we now go to the committee report? May I ask our chairperson or chairwoman, what are the main changes introduced in our committee report when we compare it with the NEP?
Yes, we will get that figure, Mr. President.
Ano yung gumalaw po na malalaking halaga?
At the top of my head, Mr. President, while we are getting the actual figures, I know that there were some increases. There were a lot of changes that were done for the Department of Health, DOTR as well. We augmented some.
Tapos compared sa GAB, si AKAP ang diferensya niya. Wala ko makita.
There were also additions in the Department of Agriculture. We can give you the
So sa amounts lang po, sa amounts, did we introduce a new program, activity or project in our committee report compared to the NEP?
Sa second paragraph pala ako ng President's Day.
Mr. President, as recommended by the chairman handling the DSWD budget, the vice chairman, we retained the NEP proposal for the DSWD.
Yes. So, basically, kunyari kaming mga colleagues nyo po, yun lang po kailangan namin malaman na ano ba yung sa committee report mo ng Senado, ano po yung malaking pagbabago from the NEP? Because the reason why I'm asking this is because I still remember the President Sona na sinabi din dyan na if possible, as much as possible, adhere to the NEP. Maybe I do not know if he was referring to the NEP amounts, but to the spirit and the main programs in the NEP. Maybe that was what he was referring to. So, yan lang po yung tanong ko. Did we change anything radically in a committee report?
Well, Mr. President, as I mentioned, let's go sa committee report, dun sa DSWD, yun yung binalik natin doon sa NEP.
Pinagdadan lang yung CSPS na.
So, Mr. President, no,
With the indulgence of the chair, I think the question was divergence from the NEP and not the GAB.
Yes. From the NEP.
From the NEP.
From the NEP.
okay. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. President. So, for the Department of National Defense, we added an additional amount from the NEP from 254 billion
PNB.
to 265 billion. So nagdagdag tayo ng 2.9 billion. For the Department of Labor and Employment, from 45 billion, 45 plus, it became 69 billion 370. So an additional amount.
Yes. Siguro that can be presented in a table form pero yung mga increases po because we just increased the amount given to a PAP. It's not because we are introducing a new program, activity or project.
No new projects or programs that are being introduced, but actually lahat naman like state colleges and universities.
So generally augmentation, dinagdagan.
Dinagdagan
Addition,
din.
okay.
And these are like
So-
social protection or
Yes.
national security. Department of Education, dinagdagan din natin
Apo,
from
apo.
748 to 751.
To reflect the priorities of the chamber. Yes. Pero may we know what budgetary entry in the NEP now was deducted? Were these amounts deducted from? Siyempre alam ko rin yung sagot.
Sinabi naman niya na conflict. Hindi ka naman yung mga legal issue.
This call, MPBF and DREAM, PGF and the rest of
Mr. President, the initial decrease is from the MPBF. The Pension and Gratuity Fund, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Fund.
Binawasan po natin yun. Binawasan po natin si NDR, National Disaster Relief.
Actually, this is a
NDR
cut from the House of Representatives already. Because your takeoff is from the NEP,
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
President, di ba?
Sige.
Pero actually, ito na yung we carried over also the one that was already rationalized by the HOR.
Yes, pero pag committee report natin, ibig sabihin nun, panindigan din natin yun. So we agree. So, di ba?
Yes, Mr.
So,
President.
It's a change. It's our change also. Okay. It's our change also. We are adopting the House led the way, cut this, and we adopted the.
Yes,
the
Mr.
cut
President,
the house.
but the House allocated it in other departments or in other line items. But as I mentioned, what we increased some parts in education, also for the military, etc. The OTR, that's where we allocated by retaining this rationalization done by the House.
Now, just to be clear, our committee report cut or decreased the NDRRMC No, the F fund. It's a fund.
NDRRMF.
NDRRMF, that's the fund. We cut the amount, we decreased the amount in our committee report.
Mr. President, we did
By how much, ma'am?
by about 9.5 billion
Compared to the NEP.
compared to the
Okay.
NEP.
Okay, pero may press release kahapon sa presidente, speech niya na ubos na daw yung kanyang that particular fund. Ubos na daw because of this. So baka
Kaya nga ma-replenish naman, Mr. President, ng 21 billion. So, and we also have our other unprogrammed funds, for example, that can augment that later on if it's not sufficient.
no, may we know the 2024 level for the NDRRMF.
Ah,
The
yes,
2024 level. Sige, para lang alam natin kasi ubos na daw siya ngayon eh. So since we're planning for 2025, i-input natin yung 2024 experience, Mr. President.
20.5 billion, the
25.5,
NEP so may increase pa rin
20.5 is the level of that fund for 2024.
for
Okay,
2024.
kahapon, sabi ng Presidente, ubos na. Ipapakonfirm natin sa DBM kung ubos na or paubos na. Okay, 20.4. What is the plan for next year? How much will we put sa 2025? 21?
Well, 280 million ang natira ngayon. So that's basically
practically,
negligible.
practically.
Okay. Oo.
Ngayon,
Ngayon,
for next year, ang plano natin to give it 21
21
flat. 21 flat.
21 billion.
Okay, so
Oo.
ini-increase
from
lang natin ng
20.5 ay
20.4.
from 20.4.
So, 600 million lang ang in-increase natin. So, siguro i-process po natin. Siguro i-process pa natin. Hindi pa naman to tataga sa bato, sabi ng chairwoman natin kahapon. So, let's process the input from the President yesterday na paubos na daw yung fund na yon. So, this November pa lang po. So, okay. So, we will have to process that.
And also at the proper time, we will also, of course, consider the recommendation of our minority leader
Yes,
based on his findings kasi tiga Marikina kayo eh.
correct.
Mr. President, tiga Marikina kayo. So, naintindihan ninyo ang effects talaga. And I know that you have your heart for your constituents. You've seen firsthand.
you.
You've experienced it firsthand. So, you know the
Mismo.
importance of these standby funds. But you also know the importance, Mr. President, of securing also certain sectors like our national security, agriculture, and education. Kaya it's going to be a balancing act. And I ask the expertise of our minority leader to how to be able to give to all of these different departments that are equally in need of all of these allocations.
Thank you for the response from our chairwoman.
Saka kayang-kaya niyo pag you're the representative, you really fight for your
Yes, ma'am.
constituents.
But Your Honor mentioned tapping the contingency fund. Kaya meron din akong tatanong diyan eh.
Sige po.
Magkano ang contingency fund data for this year is 13 billion. Tama?
1-3.
Tama. And
Correct.
what is our plan for next year, 2025? What is the contingency
The
fund?
same. The same.
May we know the status of the contingency fund as of today or as of the latest data?
Mr. President, there's a standby balance of 7 billion from the 13 billion. That's why, as the President mentioned nga na wala na talaga dun sa NDRRMF, we sympathize with that. But also, this was foreseen that certain allocations will not be enough. That's why we have this contingency.
Yes, correct. Now, maybe as a DBM, from previous years' experience, nauubos ba si contingency fund?
Di naman po.
Okay, so siguro nga maybe wag na lang yung ilagay natin sa contingency fund. Kunan na lang natin, lagay na natin sa
NDRRMF.
NDRRMF fund.
Pero, Mr. President, ganun kasi yun, no? Yung contingency fund can also, like for example, during the time of COVID, we used it also, not necessarily for NDRRMF, but for other government agencies that needed to give social assistance like the Department of Health, also DSWD. So at least parang pie lang yan, doon naman kukuha. Pero parang tayo, lahat tayo may allocation. Meron tayo para sa kuryente, meron tayo para sa pagkain, meron din tayong pool pag meron nagkulang dun sa isa. Ang problema lang kasi, Mr. President, pagka kunyari nilagay natin lahat sa isang pie, for example, NDRMF, pag nangailangan yung ibang department, there's no law to justify the transfer from that back to the contingency or to those other departments that might be in need. Conversely, if the NDRMF will need the extra funds, there's a legal basis to transfer that from the contingency to that.
What would be the historical data for the utilization of the contingency fund? 90%. Ano po yung historical last 10 years, for example, ng contingency fund?
Ano
Usage.
last 10 years ng contingency?
90%, 80%, ano po?
I-average lang po, pero ito ang start ng 2014.
Ay, nakikita.
40. Ano?
74%.
74% ang average.
Ang natitira. Ang nagagamit. 74% are utilized from the contingency on average, Mr.
Sige, pa-advise na lang po siguro kahit ako sa DBM, sa mga experts natin. What would be better? I think can afford si contingency fund to give 1 or 2 billion to the NDRRMF fund. So what would be better? I know the need for flexibility that kunyari can afford siya to let go of 1 to 2 billion. Let that remain with the contingency fund or give it to that disaster fund because recent experience have shown that we really need to augment the fund. Kasi November pa lang, this year, ubus na eh.
Mr. President, that can be taken into consideration when you make your proposals. But again, I would just like to reiterate the rationale behind it. The contingency fund can be transferred to any department that
Yes,
will be
kaya nga.
in need of
That would
an
augment-
addition. But you cannot from any department transfer
Yeah.
kung may nangangailangan. That's why we just kept it there.
So-
But I see the reason why the minority leader, kasi 200 million na lang November pa, magkakabagyo pa, wag naman po. Pero
Oh, yeah, we're not sure.
pangangailangan.
We're not sure.
So siguro kung 1 or 2 billion, pwedeng idagdag sa NDRMF. But
Well, as a matter
pero mas
of...
flexible talaga pag emergency, kahit
Mas-
na in the name of the NDRMF, pwede pa rin ang contingency fund ang maglabas ng pera eh. So
Which I think you will do this year. Tama? Most likely. Pag ma-deplete na si disaster fund, talagang mag-access sila sa contingency fund.
yes, Mr.
Sige po.
President.
I understand. Nagano ko lang. Tinitignan ko lang kung ano yung best budgetary practice ko. Alam natin kulang. Bakit pa natin bawasan? Di ba dapat anticipate natin? Dagdagan natin kay konti. But at any rate, we will discuss this off plenary na. Pero since nabanggit na ating chairwoman that the contingency fund can be used to augment any other item in the fund, can the contingency fund be used to augment the confidential and intelligence fund? Alam niyo bakit ko natanong yan, Mr. President? Kasi debate tayo ng debate dito, nag-guard kami sa plenary. tungkol
Mr.
sa-
President, only for national disasters or urgent needs. Pagka confidential and intelligence fund,
Dapat hindi.
hindi naman talaga.
Correct. Oo, dapat hindi. Kasi
And sa 2024, binawalan na yan sa GAA.
dapat daw hindi.
Hindi, contingency to. Sulit na to.
Okay, so merong special provision that the fund confidential or intelligence funds for non-security agencies unless the president certifies it necessary.
So it can for those who are already legitimately given CIF. Kasi Mr. President, sabi ko, debate tayo ng debate sa floor, binabantayan natin yung mga
okay.
levels ng level ng confidential and intelligence, tapos pwede palang i-augment from the 13 billion contingency fund.
Mr. President, with the if the president deems it necessary, but I was told that this was actually a line added here in the Senate, which we can always
Yes,
amend later on.
Kasi what,
Or be specific
I hope-
about what constitutes a national emergency for the utilization of that fund.
I hope that the chairwoman appreciates my point na, di ba,
I
debate
do.
tayo ng debate rito, binabantayan natin yung level ng mga CIF, and yet meron palang 13 billion na mas malaki pa sa level ng CIF na pinag-uusapan natin na potential source to add. It doesn't
Right.
make sense, Mr. President.
No, it doesn't. This was from last year, which can definitely be amended. And Mr. President, for the record, none of the contingency fund from last year was actually used for this year was used for CF or IF.
No,
Pero
but-
yun nga, tanggalin
but
natin
that's
yung
the
possibility.
That's the actual use. Andun ako sa the possibility nga, the theoretical.
I agree.
So, ang bantayan po.
I agree. I already accept even.
Thank you.
No, no,
In
no, no.
principle, in principle, yes.
Let's do this in
Yes,
principle, but let's discuss this in plenary.
And then I think one difference of our committee report when compared to the GAB this time is we took out the AKAP.
Yes, Mr.
AKAP.
President.
Opo. Andito naman yung ating LBRMO na may institutional memory. Last year ba yung AKAP ay kasama sa GAB o hindi? May we know, Madam, the Chairwoman?
Hindi po kasama sa GAB.
Hindi nga kasama sa GAB. So last year, si AKAP wala na sa NEP, wala pa sa GAB, lumabas sa BICAM. Okay, ngayon, sa ngayong taon, si AKAP wala sa NEP pero nasa GAB. Tapos, so improved. Actually, if you look at the basic facts, improved ang situation ni AKAP because it's now part of GAB. So, what is the reason why in some parts of the GAB sinunod ng committee natin? How come this part of the GAB where there is an AKAP to the tune of, ang AKAP kasi is Ayuda sa Kapos ang Kita program to the tune of 39 billion. So, on that point, hindi tayo nag-agree sa GAB. May we know the reasoning of the committee?
Mr. President, this is also in deference to the Vice Chair of the Committee on Finance for the DSWD. When I spoke to her about this, what she said is she would like to discuss further and to look into what really is the report on the progress of AKAP. Who has it been disbursed to? Is it really necessary or is this already part of a redundant program that can be rationalized? So, hindi po nangangahulugan na i-retain o tatanggalin natin. Kasi pagdating po sa plenary at saka yung mga submissions ng mga amendments, doon natin makikita paano na-justify ng Finance Vice Chair yung pagtatanggal o pagbabalik nitong AKAP na to.
Yung 39 billion pesos na budget for a program, mas malaki po yan sa budget ng ibang departments. Tama po?
Tama po.
Tama po. Actually, mas malaki siya sa Department of Foreign Affairs, Mr. President. Tama po? Tama po ba?
Kahit po sa budget ng Congress, mas malaki po yan. Kaya nga po,
Wag natin i-compare sarili natin. Let's say sa Department of Foreign Affairs.
mas
Tama?
malaki.
Oh.
Alam niyo po, talagang nagulanta nga ang marami dahil nga, syempre hindi naman barya-barya lang ito. Ngayon, kung talaga namang nakakatulong, kailangan malaman din natin, no? Paano ba ito nakatulong? Ito ba ay kailangan o umulit lang sa isang programa na pwedeng doon na lang natin ilagay imbes na dito. So, yun po yung mabuti rin maringgan pagdating sa budget ng DSWD. Pag-explika ng, alam ko naman, very efficient yung ating secretary ng DSWD. Baka mas kaya niyang i-explika kung paano ba nangyari ito, paano ba ipamahagi ito. Tapos, malaman natin sa Finance Vice Chair kung ito ay tatanggapin niya at ano ang dahilan kung tatanggapin niya o hindi niya tatanggapin.
So doon po sa DBCC and the DBM which drafted our the budget, may we know the reason why they dropped AKAP? Because AKAP is in the GAA, GAA 2024. So alam nila yun, may historical knowledge sila o historical data. But they dropped AKAP from NEP. May we know the reason why? What is the economic manager's thinking, Mr. President? To also guide us.
Mr. President, I was just informed that it was not part of the draft proposal of the DSWD for NEP 2025. So,
Hindi kasi paakyat yung wala nga sa list.
so sa GAB, dinagdag po ito.
Okay, so ibang process po yun. Okay po. Pwede humingi na advice sa economic managers? Is this expenditure, 39 billion peso expenditure, a wise expenditure?
Mr. President, according to our Secretary of Finance, it's a wealth transfer, and personally, he supports it.
But we will take this up more in detail when the DSWD budget is being tackled. Because yun na nga, it's a wealth transfer, but because of lack of particulars, we are not clear on who we are transferring that amount to, Mr. President. And there are definitely siguro more people, there are definitely segments of society more in need of the amounts than those who are actually receiving the AKAP because hindi siya well defined.
Okay,
Hindi siya clear nga sa Poorest of the Poor, unlike yung ibang programs na talagang 4Ps, you have to be in the registry of the poor households. Ito, subject to. I think, ganun, anyway, wala naman siya sa committee report natin, but if ever if the amount will be restored, then kasama niya yung mga special provisions na kadikit niya hindi rin clear doon who will be the recipients of AKAP. That's the
I agree.
We will bring this up again when we come to the DSWD budget.
Actually, Mr. President, any program that can really be disseminated to those that are deserving and in need, any time that the government has extra cash or the capability to support them, we support it as long as it's something that is sustainable. And I understand and I agree with the minority leader that let us see what the criteria really is and who were the beneficiaries of this. Kasi sino ba yung nagsabi? Depende kung sino ka naka-standby sa munisipyo, yun lang yung
Yes, so-
nagbibigyan, di ba? Parang kung hindi mo alam, katulad ng sabi ni Senator Alan, kung hindi mo alam, hindi mo makukuha. So dapat malaman ng ating mga kababayan na lahat kung may mga programang bago ang gobyerno. Yun lang naman.
That's why, yes, this representation appreciates the decision of the committee led by our chairwoman not to include it in our committee report. So, thank you for lack of clear justification and details.
Before we leave this
Ma'am-
point,
Yes, sir.
with the permission of the minority leader, for the record, may I ask, ang English ba ng ayuda wealth transfer? No, is that how the economic team views ayuda programs of the government as a wealth transfer mechanism?
Mr. President, it's partially true because it's transferring wealth to the poor. There are certain or lower middle class. Kasi nga, di ba, it's wealth because I guess it's an asset that we have, cash reserves or whatever, and the allocation of which we transferred. So
If it's wealth transfer in part, what is the other part? In part lang kamo eh. What is the other part of ayuda? If it's not just wealth transfer.
So there are other means, free education, health assistance. So they're not necessarily wealth transfers, but they are still assistance.
So
I
wealth
guess-
transfer would only refer to cash transfers,
Yes, Mr. President.
not to transfers or assistance that are in kind.
For now, that's a loose
Educational
loose
assistance,
definition.
health assistance, they're not viewed as wealth transfer mechanisms of the administration.
Yes, not necessarily. So it's a loose definition, but basically what we're saying is it's something that we are imparting, sharing also na makarating dun sa ating mga kababayan.
Thank you, distinguished
It's
sponsor.
1% of GDP.
Minority Leader,
Redistribution of wealth.
All
Minority Leader, madami ka pa. Si Senator Bato, ang last na after you. Hindi kita minamadali, nagtatanong lang ako, ikaw naman.
Hindi, okay.
Maaga pa po, Mr. President.
I'm just
I think
asking.
1 hour pa lang tayo.
Hindi 1 hour and a half.
1 hour and
Okay.
15 minutes. Yes, no, but before I forget, Mr. President, ito na muna about the budget na muna.
The gentleman will continue.
Yes, yes. Our 2025 proposed budget is 10% higher than the 2024. So
Yes, Mr.
so
President.
may we know what caused the increase and how come it reached 10%, Mr. President?
Well, the highest allocations are, as stated in our constitution, DepEd, di ba? Tapos, actually, 7.4%. Uh,
7 point. It's in the
10.1%,
president's message. It's
10.1%.
10%. Yes,
Oo.
ma'am.
Now, pero 7.1,
May we get our figures right, Mr. President?
so, okay. So, now, Mr. President, it's strategically crafted to balance fiscal responsibility and the need to boost investment in growth-enhancing expenditures. It was framed on the President's 8-point agenda. So, ano yung mga general expense class? Well, alam naman natin na, syempre, tumataas rin naman yung sweldo.
What caused the increase, the 10%
Oo.
increase? Sweldo lang?
Maintenance and other operating expenses will get the bulk of the proposed budget next year at 2.4 billion. The proposed, hold on, Mr. President. Again, going back, the ones that have the particular increases, no? Alam natin the expenditure, the highest is always DepEd. Then we have the DSWD. But for DepEd, for example, computerization program from 8.9 billion 2024 to 12.4 billion. Teaching allowance, di ba,
Yeah.
dinagdagan natin ito?
Yes.
From 4.8 billion naging 9.9 billion na. So doon pa lang makita mo na yung textbooks from 12 to 12.4 billion, last mile school program, and tapos learning tools from 3. Sorry, Mr. President. Yung higher allocation for health sector, the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, PhilHealth.
Siguro itong UBP na.
Tapos, wait, yung mga hospitals, for example, DOH Metro Manila hospitals from 18 billion to 23 billion. Other health facilities from 53 to 76 billion. National Health Workforce Support, pareho lang. So, yun po yung mga big items. National procured commodities for family health, immunization, nutrition, responsible parenting from 7 to 10 billion. Communicable diseases prevention and control from 1.7 to 3.5 billion. Ito, Pantawid Pampamilya Program, Mr. President, from 106 billion to 114 billion. Ito, implementation of the Centenarian Act. Di ba, marami tayong mga friends dyan na kailangan naman ay from 186.1 million to 3 billion.
Batas po natin yan.
Kasi patas na nga eh.
Po.
So,
Yes. So,
at saka sa infra, marami.
So
Kung gusto nyo isa-isahin natin.
ang iba, ganito po ba, ang iba doon ay conscious decision natin na taasan ang amount ng mga programs. Ang iba doon, tumaas talaga ang gastusin sa operations. Select ng mga hospital, how to...
Opo.
Ganun po ang dahilan.
Well, kasi sabay-sabay po pag sa operation cost, pati po yung sweldo rin ng mga
Sweldo,
Oo.
did we also increase the amount for the salaries
Well,
of government personnel?
Yes, yun nga yung
Where
malaki
is
rin
that
dun,
found in what item?
sa MPBF.
MPBF. And actually meron ba legal basis for the increase in the pay of the government employees?
Well, first of all, may executive order rin yung presidente, Mr. President,
Okay.
which is given in tranches, di ba? Parang nag-umpisa na this year, may continuation next year, and it will be adapted thereof. So, this is actually good news for
So
many of
yung-
our government workers.
So yung bulk ng amount sa MPBF will be spent for the increase in the salaries of government workers, and that is based on an EO, not a law.
Yes. But then also like the law of like the salary standardization, which is also what we follow, but there's a jump because of the current EO.
Can the DBM
And may legal basis kasi EO yan eh.
yes, sige.
And it's still anchored in the law, Mr. President.
But can the DBM educate this representation? Do we need the law to catch up because the last SSL has already expired? Tama po ba yan? Yung understanding ko?
Kasi unfortunate naman siya sa previous SSL. 306
Tama ba? Nag-expire naman SSL?
Mr. President, there's no additional law needed because EO 64 is already anchored on one of the provisions of the SSL, which is actually the schedule of increase.
Yes. Sige, we will study the inputs from Yusek Abuel of the DBM. Kanina po tinanong ko yung total amount for our overseas travel. May we know now this time what is the total amount for our ayuda programs? Feel free to define what is an ayuda program, Madam Chairperson.
253 billion is allocated for ayuda. At 253.4 billion is allocated for ayuda to provide financial support to vulnerable populations. The DSWD will receive the highest allocation, 205.5 billion. Of this amount, kasama yung Pantawid Pampamilya Pilipino Program, 4Ps, which will get 114 billion.
Sige po, kahit na, okay.
Wala pang akap dito.
Yes, yes. So, more, we have been given the figure of around 253 billion pesos in our budget for next year will be for ayuda, and the ayuda programs are named what? 4Ps? What else po?
Pantawid Pampamilya.
Yan yung
and then
4Ps.
The other
Ano po?
one is
Social pension.
social pensions for indigent citizens, SOCPEN. And then
Foods, Philippine Foods.
food stamp, Philippine food stamp for 1.8 billion. Sustainable Livelihood Program, SLP, 4.4 billion.
Thank you. Yung pong mga tupad ng DOLE at saka Integrated Livelihood Program, do we consider them as ayuda programs? Kasama din po.
Kasama po pala siya dito sa next page. Yung tulong panghanap buhay or tupad and program of DOLE, which is 14.1 billion.
Laki din. Apo.
Oo.
So thank you for that. So at least alam ng taong bayan na meron po tayong 253 billion pesos for ayuda programs in the NEP. This is in the NEP and also maintained in our committee report. Did we maintain this amount?
Kasama akap. We retained kasi hindi naman kasamang akap dito sa
Yes, yes. Opo.
Oo.
So, okay. So, yung pagdating po sa unprogrammed appropriations, although I have a pending case before the Supreme Court questioning the fourth mechanism. Did we include in our committee report the fourth mechanism?
wala pa po.
Wala. Ang fourth mechanism is yung
Transfer ba?
to look for idle reserve funds and then kukunin.
Oh.
So may we was this fourth mechanism in the NEP?
No, Mr. President.
May we know from the economic managers how come from those who crafted our 2025 budget, how come they did not retain the fourth mechanism found in the 2024 law, Mr. President? Ito na yung release mo. Ito naman yung sa iyo sa PhilHealth. PhilHealth.
Mr. President, they deemed already efficient the excess revenue, especially now that there's an ongoing court case. Meron na namang 158 lang ang prinopose. Oo, for
What does that mean? 158?
158.7 billion or 2.5% for unprogrammed.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Maliit lang.
Mm.
Oh.
Likewise.
At saka napadali yung solusyon ng problema dahil wala nang pagkukunan.
Yun na nga. So yun ang tinatanong ko, was that meant to be a one-time exercise of that power, Mr. President?
Pwede rin naman. Pwede rin.
It's like a bayanihan tree.
Okay, in the exercise of that fourth mechanism, yung sweeping the excess fund, how much was transferred to the National Treasury, Mr. President? Sweat, ayaw ko nga ganahan. Bala pang gamitin. Pero... Teka, gusto mo, break siya. Pag-break, hindi ka na.
164.9 billion excess income uh,
160,
from fund balances.
164.9 billion. Okay. And then can we get a breakdown from what GOCCs this amount came
Okay,
from?
the first tranche of fund balance, PDIC, 30 billion. Second tranche, 30 billion from the PDIC. Third tranche, 20 billion. And then first tranche of PhilHealth, 20 billion. Second tranche of PhilHealth, 10 billion. Third tranche, 30 billion. And 60 billion CMF. 60 billion. 60 billion PhilHealth. 104.9 billion PDIC.
So only from two agents, from two GOCCs. Okay. Di ba yung PDIC, that's supposed to be the insurance fund to
Yes, Mr. President, they have a reserve fund right now of, I
Yes.
think, 250
so
billion,
250
and they only
minus
use
100.
4.9.
Balance.
Yeah. 250 pa rin yung matitira, Mr. President. Ngayon, ang ginagastos lang nila for the past 5 years is parang one
Billion lang in the last 5 years.
in the last 5 years, 1 billion ang ginastos.
Total 1
nila.
billion, not 1 billion per year.
Well,
Total of 1 billion. Okay. Sige.
so five,
1 billion a
five-
year. Oh,
yeah.
pala.
So, Mr. President, it
Yes.
just underscores really the health of our banks. Of course, we're not taking that for granted. We still have 250 billion, but even if we double, triple it based on average, we're still okay, and we have the assurance that we can cover every deposit, the insured amount of 500,000 pesos.
Yes, well, I do not know the mathematics there. How much should that fund be to enhance the image of a stable banking system in the Philippines? But according to our economic managers, the PDIC could afford the remittance of 104 billion and be left with 250 billion pesos. Sige po, Mr. President. Now, the level of the unprogrammed, 158 billion pesos. Okay. Will the economic team react if Congress, in the final version of the law, will exceed such an amount, Mr. President? Kasi the economic managers, ito yung decision ninyo. You put it to what, 158 billion pesos eh. Oh, ngayon, if Congress adds 300 billion more, would you tell us that that is an unwise move, Mr. President? Not good budget practice, Mr. President?
They will support that move if the revenue source is given to them. Kung saan galing? Meron bang panggagalingan? Kasi sa ngayon parang
Sa budgeting po natin, di ba meron na tayong sources of revenue?
hindi kaya nga.
Yes.
So, well, sources of revenue.
Yes.
Or then give us 300 billion more in gas.
Ma'am, into the mic so that it will be...
If Congress wants to give them, if Congress wants to spend 300 billion more, then they should give 300 more in revenue.
Yeah, but if that's the case, that should be the proper subject of a supplemental budget already, Mr. President.
In other words, the fiscal program can be distorted, Mr. President. Kasi di ba revenue yan is imports, duties, taxes, lahat yan eh. Sa ngayon na-forecast
Kasi
na.
kung ganun din yung requirement, di ba? Requirement, let's say, ang sagot ng executive branch sa atin through the economic managers, give us a definite source of fund. Hindi ba yan yung principle behind the supplemental budget? Same thing. So I think that should be the proper practice, Mr. President.
Fund by fund. In terms of supplemental.
But the unprogrammed is also seen as a standby fund, just like similar to a supplemental.
Precisely, parang ang nag-shortcut eh. I think in my opinion, I will no longer debate this matter, but in my opinion, the better budgetary practice is, since if, as required by the economic managers, Congress needs to point to the definite source of the funding. That's the principle behind the supplemental budget, Mr. President. Now, let's go to the GAA 2024 na 731 billion yung unprogrammed. I think an increase of 400 plus from the President's proposal. How much has been funded from the 731.45 billion pesos in unprogrammed appropriations?
61 total. So the as of October 31.
As of October 31, Mr. President, 161 billion 848,172 was funded.
So,
The 731.
konti lang.
program.
Konti lang. And then yung 161 billion is even lower than the proposed level of the unprogrammed by the President of 281.9 billion. So, yes, we get the reaction from the economic managers.
Connected, from the fund balances of PPIC and PhilHealth.
Yes, we collected 164 from the fund balances of PhilHealth and PDIC.
Price,
So it's not a surprise that we spent 160 billion as of October 30.
So the 161 billion spent as of October 30, 2024, charged to unprogrammed appropriations, all came from the exercise or the use of the fourth trigger. So what happened to the first three triggers, Mr. President?
There's still available cash of,
for example, increase the dividend rate of UCC.
we increased the dividend rate of the GOCC
Collected 100 billion.
and 100 billion was collected from them.
Dividends.
Ang dividends ba ng GOCC sa program?
May we,
Ano yun? Kasama sa general fund dati? Check mo. Check.
Prioritizing the expenditure for that amount.
We're still prioritizing the expenditures for
the triggers.
the excess revenue for that amount.
May we be guided by the DBM Undersecretary? Do the GOCC dividends fund the unprogrammed appropriations, or do they go to the general fund?
Only excess revenue of the GOCCs.
What was budgeted, 50% dividends? And we collected 75, then we have excess revenue of 25%.
So it depends on the dividend. If we are
So
if the threshold is 50%, but we increase it to 75, then the 25 is available.
So as a general rule, GOCC dividends are not supposed to fund the unprogrammed appropriation items, but only as to the excess,
The excess.
from the expected,
Right,
from the
yeah,
expected
yeah,
to
from
be
the
declared.
excess,
So, well, thank you for that input, but we will double check, of course, the information that we got. So, okay, so it looks like, okay, pero siguro itong 161 billion na finan po natin sa unprogrammed appropriations, did we prioritize the original items in the 281.9 billion of the President in the NEP, or did we prioritize the 450 inserted by Congress in funding? Yes.
Mr. President, we did prioritize the foreign assisted projects, like the maintenance, repair, and rehabilitation of infrastructure facilities, the Panay Guimaras Negros Island Bridges project, Payment for right-of-way, 1.6 billion. Strengthening assistance for government infrastructure program. Public health emergency benefits and allowances for healthcare and non-healthcare workers, that's 27 billion. Yung mga hindi na
So, pero yung nabanggit po natin yan po ay doon sa original, ilan ba yung sinulat ng Presidente kasi 7 or 8? 8, yes, saan program? 8 purposes. The NEP 2024 originally contained only around 8 purposes under unprogrammed appropriations. Yun po yung na-prioritize sa 160 billion na nagastusan na po natin. Yes?
Yes, Mr. President,
Yes.
kasi it falls under
Okay.
the category of, yes.
Yes, unfortunately nga, yun na nga. So yun po yung pinaglalaban namin sa Supreme Court, no, na yung, kasi yung sa, magkano yung nakuha natin sa PhilHealth? 60 billion?
60 billion.
60 billion. In the opinion of this representation, ano po, sacred funds po sana yung sacred funds because contributions from direct contributors and from those subsidized by the government. Pero in the nature of an indirect contribution din nila yun, members' funds. But unfortunately, 60 billion of those funds were now spent for the bridge, etc. But we were trying to remedy this before the Supreme Court. And DBM, ano lang ito. In case I win or we win the case before the Supreme Court, and then na TRO naman yung 30, no? So 30 ba na TRO? 29.9. So
1/3 panalo kayo, 2/3 kami panalo.
no, 29.9 at least nandyan pa, no? So hindi na natin nagalaw, but in case we win in the petition before the Supreme Court, what will happen now? It will be, ito ang aking understanding, that the national government will be ordered to return the 60 billion to PhilHealth. What's the mechanism, Mr. President? In case we win, kasi that the sweeping of the funds is, let us say, not sanctioned, or
In the future, G.
Yes, well, Mr. President, the Secretary has always said we will follow the decision of the Supreme Court. Of course, we're hoping that we don't have to. I mean, they are hoping that they
Yes.
don't have to. But should we be required to return it, then we will find a way to do so. Then sa budget yun. We will have to do that for next year, make payment arrangements and appropriations.
Nangyari naman to before na. Kaya tinatanong ko lang from experience, ano ang mekanismo, ano ang sistema ng ayan.
For asking the national government to return.
To return?
For now, there is no direct order from the Supreme Court, from what we understand, from what the Secretary understands, for us to return it.
Yes, about the particular case, it's still pending. So we are not claiming na may order na po na panalo. Sabi ko nga, just in case. So it was a theoretical question. So before I give way to Senator Bato, Mr. President, ito muna. During our September 4, 2020, bakit 2022? Ang aga naman ito. Okay. This was in the September 2022 DBCC hearing. The DOF said that local governments have a surplus position. May I get a definition of what is meant by a surplus position? Pardon my ignorance, Mr. President.
Okay, the local government code does not allow local governments to have a deficit. So kailangan talaga eksakto yung expenses nila dun sa kanilang allotment or income. Unlike the national
Para sa
government.
Amerika.
For 2024,
10 billion.
the local government will have a surplus of 310 billion.
5
2025,
5 billion.
455 billion surplus for the local government. Usually, these are the ones na mga may surplus, yung mga big cities, di ba? Oo, Metro Manila. So our colleague here will be able to someday see si Makati.
No, I'm asking this, I'm pursuing this subject matter, Mr. President, because yesterday napag-usapan nga yung national debt, GOCC debt, as well as LGU debts. And so I think even here in Metro Manila, merong LGUs na baon na sa utang. What is the rule? What is the rule, Mr. President? What is the borrowing capacity of the LGUs, Mr. President, as a rule? Mr. President?
There is a limit that the LGUs can borrow.
There's a limit that LGUs can borrow. This is also the DOF actually. The local government, in the local government code, will compute the capability of the LGU and the ceiling 20% of their budget of their ERA.
But again, that's the limit of what they-
20% of their ERA budget of their regular income is the amount that they can borrow. 20
Iba,
per...
hindi,
Wait,
naghalo-halo na po,
oo
ma'am.
nga.
Kasi, wait,
kasi halo-halo na rin yung mga tanong dito. Teka,
Baka
hold
pagod
on.
ka na.
Let me just
Baka pagod ka na rin. Naghalo nga, naghalo. Or 20% of their budget. Iba yun sa ano na.
Okay. So kung ano man yung income ninyo, Mr. President, sa local government, you cannot exceed 20% of the amount of your income of what you can borrow. So kung ang kinikita nyo ay 100 pesos, let's say, so yung 20% nun, 20 pesos, hindi ka pwedeng lumagpas doon sa paghihiram mo. So kung 1 million ang kita ng local government unit, hanggang 200,000 lang ang pwede nilang hiramin.
And yes, when we refer to the kita of the LGU, do we refer to the locally generated income plus the national tax allotment, or just the locally generated income?
Yes, you're correct, Mr. President.
Which one? Just the local-
NTA plus the
Plus the
local revenue source.
More or less the budget nila. What they can spend.
Pero dapat regular income, meaning every year kung ano
Recurring.
yung matatanggap
Recurring.
nila. So yung mga taxes, yung mga meron, yung hindi yung from a windfall. Okay,
Yes.
yung parang expected mo na regular payments to the local government. Taxes, permits, yung mga ganon.
What agency or government body is trying to
DOF,
discipline
diba?
our LGUs when it comes to
DOF
borrowing?
through the Bureau of Local Government and Finance,
Yes,
BLGF.
BLGF.
Actually, ngayon ko lang narinig.
Yun na nga, kasi marami nang na-shock, for example, ngayon na na-involve na tayo sa local politics, Madam Chairperson. Medyo na marami, for example, sa Marikina, marami parang nagulat sila na, gano'n na ba kalaking utang ng city, 3.6 billion pesos. Wala po bang, may we know from of course, from our DF Secretary.
Yung sa Marikina in particular, gusto niyo malaman.
3.6 billion pesos. Kasi konti lang ang population So on a per capita, wala po bang requirement, may we know from the DOF Secretary who is I think the BLGF is under him. Is there a requirement for a public consultation before an LGU can contract loans or additional loans, Mr. President?
Mayors get the approval of the Sangguniang.
The mayor should get the approval of the Sanggunian,
Yes.
Mr. President. And the Sanggunian will do the public consultations for you.
Pero generally speaking ata parang merong nagiging delegation of power to the mayor, Mr. President. But anyway, that's just an observation. So I hope that the national government through the DOF and the BLGF will also pay attention to the ballooning debts of our LGUs and guide them. I mean, guide them. Kasi,
Yeah, Mr. President, kaya nga may surplus rin eh. The BLGF is also monitoring that. But of course, it's a case-to-case basis. Although there is a surplus for the LGU funds, there's probably some LGUs also that are overextending itself.
kasi yung term, the term of the loan most likely will go beyond the term of the contracting local chief executive, Mr. President. I think that's a problem.
That's always the case. Parang
Yes,
pag yung
kaya nga, is
presidente,
there-
minamana mo yung utang na ginawa ng like Secretary Ralph has to continue on with the previous commitments. That's why we have these additional payables to mga health workers natin na kinuha na natin, kailangan bayaran. Imagine from the time of the pandemic pa ito.
Well, anyway, siguro subject matter for possible legislation, no? Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, I'm willing to give way to Senator Bato de la Rosa.
Mr. President, before we give way, can we have a
So yes, I will suspend my interpellation and I will
health
resume after Senator Bato de la Rosa, but the chairwoman is asking for a break.
unless it's a long interpellation?
One lang si Bato.
Okay, then we'll wait before we take a break and resume.
Tayo, remind mo ko ano.
Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, to ensure continuous deliberation without suspending the proceedings, may we recognize Senator Bato de la Rosa to interpellate, Mr. President.
Senator Bato is recognized and may proceed.